All right, welcome everybody. This is San Francisco Big Analytics, and today we have a special guest and talking about a topic we frankly never covered before. So I'm so glad that we can have Taryn from Facebook to give a talk. Being engineer is not enough. So let me give a brief introduction about Taryn. Taryn is an angel investor, startup advisor, currently leading a research engineering team working at neural interface at Facebook. Previously, he was a director R&D at the CTRL lab, which is acquired by Facebook, and also working on the brain-machine interface. And he's also working on self-driving car systems as the CTO of Voyage, and work at Apple on the numerous things. And so I mean, totally experienced in terms of machine learning, deep learning, and all these cutting edge research. And he also working on for the U.S. Navy and Army on the perception system. So totally experienced and has a lot of say in terms of machine learning infrastructures. But he chose to decided to give a different talk, and it gave based on the experience he gained over the years, and try to give advice to the engineers as a different perspective. So without further ado, Taryn, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Chester, and hello everyone from SFBA Talks. Thank you, Chester, for organizing this, and it's definitely an honor. So I guess I'll just dive right in. Yeah, so the talk I wanted to give today, folks, is titled Being an Engineer is Not Enough. And the impetus for me to give this talk is that I often find myself giving advice to a lot of young engineers about career growth and how to get in on a new field and how to make an impact in a new field. And so I wanted to crystallize these thoughts into one slide deck that I hope to share with you folks today. And I'm okay with having like an informal sort of session with this. It's quite short, but I feel to the point. So let's dive right in. So I'll start with this old fable, this old tale about the fox and the stork. And the story goes something like this: that once upon a time there was a fox who wanted to invite his stork friend to dinner. And the fox, being a fox, eats foods and drinks liquids in a certain way from a pan, because he's a fox and he licks, licks the pan up in a certain way, right? But it was very hard for the stork to eat with the fox, because the stork has a very, very big sort of beak, long beak, and it's very hard for the stork to sort of eat the food that the fox was preparing for him, right? And so that didn't really work out. So, to show gratitude, I guess, the stork said, hey, you know what, told the fox that next time you should come over for dinner, and I'll make dinner, right? But the stork, being a stork, he has a long beak. The way that, he eats food is through this sort of vase-like structure, because he can put his beak in there and he can drink out of there, right? But that doesn't fit the fox, right? And so, the whole parable here is that basically, one should actually try to understand the other side. And if you don't do that, you will not be able to basically eat together at the same table, right? And this is actually one case where I think that when I was in kindergarten, I said, what's the use of all these stories that I'm learning here in kindergarten? But apparently they actually do have a use further down the road. So what I see today in startup land and big companies, especially in tech, is that we also have a tale of two languages here. And the two languages here specifically are in regards to engineering and marketing, right? And what I mean by marketing here, as engineers, we tend to think of marketing as like this four-letter word that, the first image we have is, some slick guy with, smells of crazy cologne, and he's always trying to sell you something, and he's always trying to sort of, make a case for something or spin something in some certain way, right? And I think that's a predominant sort of perception of marketing, right? And so as engineers, we're just after truth. We just want to understand how something works, how it doesn't work, so on and so forth, right? But the message that I hope to portray today for folks here is that, especially as engineers, we shouldn't think of marketing in this fashion, right? We should actually think of marketing as just a different side of yourself, right? Sort of like yin and yang. So we're very good at being able to technically design things. We're very good at being able to design whole new systems, integrate new systems, come up with new algorithms, things like that, right? But there's a whole actual component that goes along with that that's often neglected as engineers. And I see this typically with young engineers and even some senior ones as well, right? So what I hope to do here is sort of show you folks that there's this other side to engineering that's not slick and, you know, just like this marketing guy on the left-hand side, but that's actually very instrumental to your growth and to your prosperity. So you often hear this this thing of like, hey, I'm a great engineer. I've accomplished a lot. I've worked so hard on like so many things. My code is always top notch. People are always telling me that my code is awesome. My algorithms are maybe great, right? And I even implemented this hot new paper, transformer RNN or whatnot in CUDA of all things, right? Or in C, even if you want, right? So this is like a stereotypical case that people say that I'm just a great engineer and a great machine learning scientist or whatnot, and that's great. Problem is that I'm also an engineer, right? And I'm here to tell you that that's not enough, right? It's not enough that you're a great engineer. And it's not enough because before code, before algorithms, there were people. And as engineers, we should not forget the people aspect of a lot of our work. Okay, and this is basically like the main thesis. And so concretely, I've seen this sort of manifest in two different ways over time, right? I've seen this manifest in the first way where you're talking about marketing your work. And then in a second way where you're talking about marketing yourself, okay? And these are actually super, super important points for young engineers and even senior ones to understand, is that regardless of how good you are, you still need to market your work, right? Regardless of how good you are, you still have to market yourself. And market yourself here meaning not in a way that's like going back to our used car salesman marketing, but you actually have to learn the components, the language of communication with other people, just like we learn C or C++ or Python or algorithms, signal processing, machine learning, calculus. We've learned all these languages. We also should learn the language of how to deal with people, how to communicate properly, how to market yourself and your work. So let's talk about the first one, marketing your work, okay? When it comes to marketing work, I've sort of tried to crystallize this down into really two things. Okay, less is more when it comes to that, and breadth first over depth first. Okay, and we'll see what that sort of means. So many times, and multiple number of presentations that I've seen and pitches and so on and so forth, I'll come across something like this. Right, so some engineer is trying to explain to a room or to some other engineer maybe even or to leadership or whatnot, says, so this algorithm uses an LSTM and takes in pixels, but we also use inverted labels. And by the way, we put this on a cluster so that we can fast train using 16 GPUs. But for the API, actually, we can utilize 32, but only on Tuesdays, since the client side will ping more images that day. Also, by the way, for an LSTM, we can use Atom Optimizer, but I made this file where you can change that. It's on the current, right? So, so many times, I'm sure folks here can also relate, like we've come across this, right? There's just like this wall of text, or there's just like this long, unending speech that has these unending sentences going on and on and on and on, right? And I got news for you folks, right? Like if you're talking like this, the person on the other side is gonna lose you in about 3 seconds. Right? They're going to lose you. And this actually also goes towards whenever you do presentations, right? If you're a startup founder and you're giving presentations either to your investors or either to your own engineering team or vice versa, right? You're not getting a message across, right? It's because this is the language where you might talk, for example, with another engineer about it. Even that's bad, right? But it's not succinct. It goes all over the place, right? It doesn't crystallize points for people, right? And so what you'd actually want to do is, something more akin to this. And let me see if I can move my this guy over here so we can see. So you can say, look, the client API can now feed us images. The backend LSTM structure works. We need to optimize for GPU usage, especially for Tuesdays. And because of that, I'm happy to talk more, right? So there's a very, very important element here, folks, in technical communication. And again, marketing your work, right? Around how you take this big complex issue and you compress it down to its salient parts, right? Because someone on the other side can easily understand the right-hand side here. You're thinking in bullet points, you're talking in bullet points, you're being very clear. And in the end, you're giving an opening to say, I can actually talk about some more details for these components here, right? That's infinitely better than what we see on the left-hand side. And by the way, I'm an engineer, right? So, I mean, like there used to be a time when I used to talk like that on the left-hand side, right? Did not work out, right? Did not work out at all. I lost myself. I lost the other side. They came out confused. They just get this wall of text, right? And so it takes time and it takes practice. But I would argue that this is a very, very important muscle to train. And I'd also argue that this is a very, very, very common symptom of what we see today in the technology sector at large, right? Communication here is key. Okay, less is more. And I actually just took the liberty to draw this out this morning about this. But here's another way to kind of look at it for the engineers in the room is that, you're giving a speech and, the blue line here is showing you kind of talking about something. But notice how that if I start talking about something, people often sometimes go like depth first. They'll say, oh yeah, so I did this LSTM. And by the way, it takes these neurons in here and then I train them like this and then, and all the, suddenly you're all the way out on the deep end and you're talking about it. Then you come back up for air and then you move on. This is plugged in here. And oh, by the way, I come in like this and you go in circles. And sometimes you just go way off the deep end and off the page. And that's not good. And so on and so forth, right? And what's necessary here, again, like I was saying earlier, is that, and this is just this in pictorial form, is know how to talk about these nodes, keep it high level in the beginning, and then just iterate over and over again. And so in visual form, you can, talk about this point here. We made an LSTM, talk about this point here. There's some issues with training, but we can talk about that in a minute. And then you can go on here and say, now that it works, we actually feed it these images. And over here you say, well, these images actually have a problem because there's something about the sizes. Let's table that and come back to that, right? And so on and so forth, right? And so you can keep doing this, right? Versus going depth first. And so this is what I say here, that the green points here show that talk about these points. Those points over here mean that you can talk about them later, right? And you can say something like, I'll come back to that, or overall, or let me skip the details for now, but come back to that later, right? In that way, you're maintaining your narrative. You're keeping a consistent and clear sort of narrative, consistent and clear story without having people come out in the weeds. And by the way, there's also a very practical point to this. If you're doing this here, guess what? The meeting's done, right? You doing all this is going to take about an hour. And by the time your hour's done, you just end up over here. Now guess what's going to happen? There's going to be another meeting. And we all love meetings. I'm 100% sure, right? So there's going to be another meeting because people are going to say, I didn't quite get the overarching story. So we're going to have, we're going to make another meeting about this, right? So no one wants that, right? So again, clear writing means clear thinking, right? If you're able to take complex issues and write about them clearly, that actually shows to the other side that you're able to think about this clearly, right? Clear speech means clear understanding, right? If you're able to talk clearly, to be able to make these points, to make them succinct, to make them compressed, right? It shows to the other side that this person really understands their stuff, right? And for young engineers and even some senior ones who want to rise up, who want to, level themselves up, it's really, really key to show to other folks, including your peers, by the way, that you're able to write clearly, that you're able to communicate clearly, that you're able to think clearly, and you're able to understand things clearly. And the overarching talent here, folks, is thinking clearly and clearly understanding. Show that you're able to remove or like separate the signal from the noise, right? It shows that you're able to focus on what's important. And if you're able to focus on what's important and communicate that, that means that you're able to do what? Prioritize, right? And if you're able to prioritize, that shows that you're able to think strategically. And if you're able to think strategically, that shows that you're made up of leadership material, right? Because leaders at the end of the day need to be able to think strategically. They need to be able to figure out what's a problem right now, what I have to deal with, what's important or what's urgent, right? What's a detail that doesn't really matter, and what's a detail that actually does matter, right? When you're able to communicate clearly, you're showcasing your capacity for being able to really, at the end of the day, think strategically. And so you want to really invest in this muscle. You want to show others around you and just for yourself that you're able to think strategically. Okay, so the second part is marketing yourself. All right, and this is actually like another big sort of item up, out there, and it's really, really important. And again, I think a lot of folks get too caught up in like wrong aspects of this, right? Marketing yourself is something that we've all been doing since the beginning, okay? It's something that you do every time you write your resume, you're marketing yourself. Every time you go into an interview, you're marketing yourself. Every time, if you're a startup founder, if you go pitch, you're marketing yourself, right? It's a very, very important point. And it's also very relevant even if you're inside an organization already or a startup or a company. And we'll see why. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one to hear it, does a tree really fall, right? I'm sure everyone here has heard that proverb. This goes back to what we were saying about the engineer who says, you know what, my work is great, guys. Like I do really good work. My code is 3x faster. My algorithm is really top notch. And I've applied it to all these things and it's really, really cool. And while that may be true, if you don't show that, if you don't show that you did this and it can be applied here and here, and this is something that has an impact elsewhere, it doesn't really matter, right? If it's just sitting on your desktop and it's super, super cool and you won't talk about it, you won't tell anyone about it, no one's going to know about it, right? It's as simple as that. And intellectually, I know everyone knows this, but way too often I see a lot of engineers kind of get caught up in this thing of like, well, I'm just a really good engineer and look at all the work that I've done. And it's true, they are, and they've done good work, but they haven't popularized it, right? They haven't crossed the chasm to make people aware of it, right? People don't know who they are. People don't know what kind of work they're doing. People don't know how they're doing it, right? And it's actually a very sinister thing because in the moment, it doesn't really matter, right? But over a long period of time, right, others around you will market themselves and they'll show themselves. And they're the ones who actually end up moving forward, even if they have something that works that's not as optimal as, say, something that you've come up with, right? So the main point of this is that just because, and as engineers, it's very hard for us to swallow this, right? Just because you have something that works better, if you haven't told people about it, if you haven't, popularized it to some extent, if you haven't put it out there, if you haven't educated people about your work, it doesn't matter. No one's going to know who you are. No one's going to know about the great work that you've done, right? And that work is on you. That work is on you to kind of proselytize that, right? So how do you do that? And just give some more mechanics on this. So, this is you in an organization or just in a startup or anywhere, okay? And, around you, you're going to have all sorts of people, right? You're going to have people who, who look like this, and some are smiling, and some are so happy they seem sad, and they're kind of strange. And some of the people here have really big egos, right? I'm sure we have a couple like that. Some here are just weird, they're just strange people in some way, right? They're contorted in some dimensions and some, right? And like I said before, it's not enough for you to just sort of sit here coding or coming up with something, or being in your own little cave and saying that I'm just going to do something cool. What you really want here is to develop a lot of these relationships between those different folks. Now, I want to actually do a little bit of a deep dive on this, because I think a lot of engineers and scientists, either don't see the value of relationships, but B, think that relationships are very sort of linear and transactional, right? And I think that's actually the wrong way to look at it, right? So here's a couple things. A relationship between someone and yourself, right, does not need to be transactional. It just needs to exist. And what that means is that, notice, for example, here, I've put these arrows actually in a specific way, saying that this is you over here, and maybe you give something to this person in a certain way. It hits them on, at this angle, and maybe they give something back to you in this way, right? Similarly here, maybe with this person, you're hitting them on this angle, but maybe from their vantage point over here, they're hitting you on this angle, right? So, the point here is that I'm not saying that we should all go and just try to just do some networking with others for the sake of networking, because that is actually kind of, a little bit transactional. It's also very vapid and very shallow, right? The point I'm trying to make here is that you should just build your relationships in general, because relationships in general have a very nonlinear compounding effect on your career. And it's actually crazy how efficient this is. It's also very sinister, like I said before, where if you take a month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and you don't build any relationships, in the moment, it probably doesn't matter, right? And you probably won't feel any negative effects. But over a long time span, over the span of years, you will start to see not so much a negative effect, but a lack of positive effects, right? So not so much negative growth, but a lack of positive growth. And this is very simple, because, if you talk to this person, build a relationship with them, and again, this could be within an organization, this can be within your startup, this can be within the peripheral area where your peers exist in a space, right? When you build that relationship, you get to know their problems. You get to know what they're working on. You get to know their perspective on things, right? They get the same thing from you. And like any sort of aged wine, right? Sometimes it takes time for, the details there to sort of coalesce again, around something concrete, right? Meaning at some point, this person here might have an idea that they want to loop you in, because they know you, right? And they know that you're an expert on, audio processing, for example. Say, hey, by the way, Taryn, I want to actually get your opinion on this, right? And that might lead to a venture, right? That might lead to a startup. That might lead to an opportunity, right? Same thing over here. if you make a relationship with this person, maybe they're not even technical. But maybe they have an insight about a problem that you can solve. Maybe you give them insight about the stuff that you do, and it can help them think about, how to minimize their ego, maybe, or something like that, right? Right. So the point is, when I look back, for example, at my career trajectory, I was always the type of person to just go after things, right? So I'm a huge go-getter. And when I look at the trajectory, what I was really doing was this here, this chart, right? I was forming relationships with people, deep relationships with people, right? Not something shallow, not something vapid, deep relationships. And it was only from these relationships with people that just one thing led to another, that led to another, that led to another, that led to another. And if I go back and think to myself that, oh, I didn't really need these people. And that's true. I didn't need them. But I'm a better person today because I built relationships and I was able to learn from people around me. And hopefully they're able to learn from me as well. And it is that connective tissue that you need to build that is a springboard for your career. Okay. So that's general life advice. In organizations, this is also paramount. We're talking about marketing your work. So let me just bring it back to that. In organizations, there's a cost to information, right? And so it's hard, there's a lot of noise out there. It's hard for people to know what you're working on unless you build a relationship with them. That's just the way it is, right? Unless you build relationships with people, unless you build these bridges, it is hard for them to know what you're doing. And it's hard for them to understand what you're doing. And it's hard for them to support you in what you're doing, right? And again, it doesn't matter how good your stuff is, right? You train something 3x faster than the thing currently on infrastructure, doesn't really matter, right? It matters technically, right? But it doesn't matter for your springboard, right? You're not going to be at the tip of their tongue when they want to think about the problems that they want to solve, right? So, my whole point here is that make an effort to build lasting, concrete, genuine, authentic relationships with people. This will help your career over the long run. Some of the struggles when I've advised and mentored young engineers on this is they say, well, I don't know what to go approach them with. I don't know what to talk about. Or something like, I'm just not ready yet to talk about this thing. I want to wait until I learn more about this, and then maybe I can go talk about it. That's actually not optimal, right? Because the fact of the matter is that you're never going to be ready, right? There's no, tomorrow's today, number one. And again, we're not saying go and put on a show for these people. We're saying build a relationship with them, right? Understand where they're coming from, understand their background. That's mainly what you have to do. And as far as like approaching people, very concretely, again, you don't have to go in with something. You can just be curious, right? You can just approach them and say, hey, I see you're in this organization. I see you're working on so and so forth. I'd love to learn more about this, right? I mean, and generally be interested, right? And that's something that I've used across my whole life for, not even in my professional life, but also my personal life. And it works wonders, right? Because I'm genuinely curious about what folks are doing, what they can teach me, and perhaps what I can teach them. That's how it starts, right? Just as how you're curious. I mean, so I'm curious about a lot of things you can see from the books behind me. I'm curious about a lot of stuff, right? But for every book here, there's a person I'm also interested in. I would love to learn more, right? And so you can think of people as a book. So if you like books like I do, look at people the same way. People are also books. And maybe it's good to go open the pages a little bit and see what they have to say. Right. So, so the whole summary here is that, forming relationships is integral to your success after a certain point. It's not an option. It's integral to your success. Learn to approach people. Be curious. Go in with no expectations. Again, you take a book off the shelf, flip through it, just kind of read it, right? See if you like it, see if you don't. Connective tissue with people is going to be the springboard for your success, right? You need to market your work and yourself to people at the end of the day. You're not marketing it to an AI yet. There might be a time when we do that. We're not doing that just yet. And if they are, and you know, fact is, if you are, they'll probably think like people anyway, right? If it's an AGI or something like that. And again, remember that the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. I forget who came up with that, but you know, in this case, it's not so much interest as much as networks and connectivity, the connective tissue. The most powerful force in the universe for you is the power of your relationships from people around you. That fact can't be understated. And so I also want to leave folks with this quote here. I have to keep moving this all over the place, but you know, the only thing you got in this world is what you can sell. And the funny thing is, you're a salesman and you don't know that, right? So this was taken from Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman, right? As well as the quote, "To sell is human" by Daniel Pink. So this is just to show that there really isn't a dichotomy between engineering and marketing. Engineering is about truth, what works, what doesn't work, why. Marketing is about visibility at the end of the day, at least honest marketing. Honest marketing is about visibility, putting stuff out there, explaining it properly, showing it to people, right? And that's actually a very human thing to do. It's incredibly human. There's actually another book that people should look at. It's called Life's a Pitch, right? So no matter what you're doing, you're always trying to pitch someone something, right? Whether it's your mother, your dad, your siblings, your partner, your business partner, your coworker, your colleague, your boss, whoever it is, there's always a pitch there. And so just as like we go to school for STEM to become great engineers and scientists, I want to bring it back and say, you know, as an engineer, I'm telling you that one of the most potent techniques and really frameworks that you can invest in is how to do honest marketing of yourself, how to do proper communication for the work that you do. It will serve you very well. See it as just another side of the coin when it comes to what makes a holistic engineer in this modern day and age. So that's all I have. And I wanted to also share these 4 books that I think people will get a great kick out of. Managing Humans is a good one. Don't Make Me Think is actually about design, like, you know, how do people come up with design paradigms for UIs, right? Which goes a lot into being able to properly communicate. To Sell is Human, and Debugging Teams, Better Productivity Through Collaboration. These are good books I would also recommend to people interested in this. And so anyway, with that, I will stop here and put it over to Chester. I think Chester is muted.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, thank you. It's a great talk. And so we'll get one question from the audience that is any advice for recent grads to get a notice on their first job?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Chester?
So any advice for recent graduates to get noticed for their first job?
Ah, okay. Yeah, sure. Meaning like you just graduated and you want to get noticed in the market. Yeah,
right, exactly.
So great question, by the way. The answer is yes. I have a lot of opinions on this. So if we're talking about STEM, if we're talking about tech in the sense that I'm assuming the person asking the question is talking about software algorithms and machine learning and things like that, right? Absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, so as an employer, as someone who does a lot of hiring, okay, right? I'm actually interested in seeing what you can do, right? I'm actually interested in seeing how gritty this person can get, right? How much they can mentally push through a problem. I'm interested in seeing their critical thinking skills, right? Can they take a problem, and even if they don't know the answer, can they actually think about it with me, right? So a lot of my interviews, for example, is, like, I will never ask you in an interview how to sort a string. I will never do that, because I think that that doesn't tell me anything, right? Like, even if you don't know it, you can Google it and learn it, right? And if you do know it, that doesn't tell me, it just tells me you memorize, so it doesn't tell me that. I like to ask questions about unsolved problems and think with that person, right? So I remember back in like the autonomous car field, my interview questions were something like, why do you need color from an LCD camera to do pattern recognition for cars, right? Why not just get the edges, right? And I mean, I don't know the answer to that, right? But I think about that because I say I'm interested in compression and the bandwidth and the latencies and all of this, right? So I'm trying to, right? And that's a question I pose for a lot of my interviewees, and I want to see them think about that. I want to see them tell me why they think color, like red, green, blue, is very much salient for being able to detect cars or objects, right? And why not just edges? And I want them to kind of walk through almost the physics of that, right? Almost the critical thinking aspect of that, right? And so, yeah. So to answer the question, absolutely. One thing that people can do is do your own projects, right? Make your own projects, put them on GitHub, right? Put like pick a problem that you're interested in that's hard and just code it up or talk about it or solve it and just market that, right? So GitHub, I think, is a great platform for people to do that. And tell people, go make your portfolio, right, of like your works. And you don't have, they don't have to, it's not like you should prove that P equals NP or anything like that, right? Yeah, but just go and show that here's a project that I did, and this is what I came up with, here are my results, and this is what I think about it, and so on and so forth, right? So in that way, you're able to show employers that you're a critical thinker, that you deliver, right, which is very important, and that you're able to show your work, because at the end of the day, you have to show the work somehow, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would say TLDR, pick a couple projects, put them on your GitHub, and market that, right? Just go and do that, and you'll immediately be like at the top tier percentage of people who are visible with their work. You will get noticed, right? And
Yeah,
people.
totally agree there. Totally agree there. And actually, when I'm looking for people, that's also looking for people who has done extra work and see whether, yeah, you're a coder or not, or you just took a few classes.
Yeah, yeah. Or if you just know about something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
Great. So I have a few more questions. Okay, folks, if you have questions, post on the Q&A site. So okay, and one of them asks you to get a name of these books somewhere. Set in the slides. There's some are cut off or something. Some are hidden.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So the first one, sure. So the first one. So sorry about that. I tried to fit them into one picture. The first one, yeah. So this first one is called Managing Humans. And it's basically like a whole bunch of stories about how software engineering stories from Google and elsewhere about things like the nerd in the cave, and then the Monday madness and things like that, right? So it's quite anecdotal, but I think it has some very good insights as well. Second one's called Don't Make Me Think, right? And in fact, I have them right here actually, so I can actually put them. Yeah. So the first one. So the first one here is Managing Humans. Okay, right? And they're pretty hilarious, actually. It's pretty good. Don't Make Me Think is the other one. Okay, right? Yeah. So it's about the principles of how you should make UIs, right? But I think it's very, very apt, and there's a lot that you can learn about this for how you just present stuff in general, how you communicate about algorithms and things like that, right? Debugging Teams is another one that I like. I don't agree with everything that this book says, maybe about 80%, but that's good enough. Still makes it a good book, right? So they'll talk about like the myth of a genius, the 3 pillars, day-to-day discussions, how to run meetings, things like that, right? And then the last one I like here is to sell as human, right? You know, and so yeah, so he's always saying that you know, basically what like we're talking about here is that you have to you should get out of the mindset that selling is something bad and something like almost like dishonest, because our society kind of thinks of it that way. It's actually a very human thing to do, and you can do that in a very honest way, right? It's also very critical, right? So I definitely recommend that as well. It's very apt for the work that we do.
Excellent, excellent. So another question is the any advice? I would say, well, somebody changed the question now. So things to watch out of when you're building a relationship. So you know, you talk about the building a relationship. Any things to watch out?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, it's like any relationship, right? You need to, I mean, look, you need to figure out if the other side is honest and genuine, right? You know, and authentic, right? You should come in with authenticity, right? And you should be honest and authentic. You know, I think it's actually pretty clear pretty quickly when someone is just trying to be very transactional with you, right? Like, yeah, well, like that they only give when you give, and you know, and they kind of, you know, and so there's this whole concept of like givers and takers, you know, yeah. So like, some people are only takers, some people are only givers, and you know, so right. So yeah, there's you know, we're talking about making sure that you are dealing with building relationship with honest people, genuine people, people who are authentic, right? I mean, and look, sometimes in life, you're put in a position that you have to deal with someone who's not being authentic, right? That you put in a position where you have to deal with someone who's not honest. You put in a position, right? And so, right, and so you also have to, you know, learn how to navigate that, you know, right? But I think it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly, right? What the type of person that you're dealing with, right? So I always say that as long as you're aware of what you're dealing with, that's actually very important. But whether or not you decide to engage after that is on you, and it depends on the context, right? But very, very importantly is you should figure out, is this an authentic person? Is this someone, or is this someone who's just being very transactional? And I think that becomes pretty clear to most people over time. What you do with that is a different story, but you should at least know that, right? You should, you know, at least know that. And by the way, this is actually a very good question, because there are a lot of startups out there, okay, who will sell you so hard on something, okay, right? Yeah, like join now, and they'll butter you up, and they'll do this, and you know, yeah, all right, they do all that, right? Because they're trying to pitch you to join them and do something, okay? You should figure out, and it's on a lot of young engineers to figure out, take a step back and say, what does this individual want with me? What is the value that I add? Number one, be very clear about that. And number two, you should also be aware and try to figure out if the CEOs of these companies, or the person trying to hire you, if they're authentic, right? And so one thing I always like to ask, you know, and I advise people to do this, is anytime you join an organization, or join a startup, or join a new company, you're not interviewing for them. You should also interview them, right? Yeah, you should ask them, who else has worked here, right? Have you let any people go, right? Have people left, right? Can I talk with them? Why, right? Those are very important. And those are questions that a lot of engineers, like junior engineers, don't ask. They're like, they think they're just there to do some whiteboarding. I don't know. You're supposed to also assess them, because there's nothing worse than spending years of your life in a startup, or a company, or an organization. It could be anything, nonprofit, whatever, where you're dealing with unauthentic people, right? And so you should also interview the company as well. Don't forget that.
Good advice. I actually have a question myself. So, so you know, being working in related to data engineering, data science, data infrastructures, and you had a different layers with working with the different organizations within the company. I mean, the marketings, data science teams, or data engineering teams, or data infrastructure teams, or DevOps teams, and so there's different teams working on that. So in terms of, as you said, so you need a, one is marketing your work, marketing yourselves, not literally going there try to show off our stuff, but sometimes you felt that many cases, your work may not be reflected to a certain executive level. On the other hand, the receiving end, the people who use what you build on end up showing 90% of your work essentially. So, of course, they have different responsibility. People take your stuff, present it to another organization, so is your customer, and you're building that for them. But on the other hand, how you make yourself be actually say, hey, I did an 80 or 90% of this work, and then so how do we communicate that to don't get your own team to be didn't know, even the senior exec didn't even know you did that work because they thought the other team did everything. So how do we do that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, yeah. That's an excellent question. Yeah. So I think you're talking about like the white label phenomenon, right? Yeah. That there's this thing, and then within it, there's engine that kind of makes it work, right? But like the label is on the outside. The label of this is white labeled, like it's not Chester's team. It's just this other team that used it, and here they go, right? Yeah. And that's the only kind of like path basically to the higher levels and things like that, right? Yeah. So yeah. So look, I mean, so I think every case is different, right? Every case is different. Yeah. So some organizations, for example, some very old traditional organizations tend to be very sort of hierarchical, right? And so yeah, so you can only go and talk to a high level exec or a high level manager or something only through the chain, right? And if you kind of bypass that, it's a big no-no to fall apart, right? So that's like one thing. Some other organizations are very much open, where it's just anyone can talk to anyone and it's expected, and so on and so forth, right? I think that in today's day and age, right? I think for a variety of companies out there, there's always some sort of forum, right? Some sort of like receptacle for being able to communicate results, communicate what you've done, communicate, like in a nice way, basically, right? Actually, in the olden days, there used to be email lists, right? Yeah, big email lists about something that has a gazillion people, and people would send an update or something, right? And you could show it, right? Yeah. So, I think that again, yeah, it just depends on where you advertise, right? And I think the key there is not that you should never advertise, you always should, right? And not just because you want to take credit. No, you're just saying, this is who we are. This is what we've done. And this is the type of help we've given this team, right? And we continue to support this team, right? And we continue, right? Yeah. So I think there could be a couple of things. Well, one thing comes to mind might be approaching the team who's consuming our work and saying, hey, would you like to do like a joint demo together, right? So yeah, so we can talk about like this work that we've done, the work that you guys have, and how it integrates. And I think that'll be a huge boon for both of us, right? That's, for example, one strategy, right? Another strategy is to find a forum within the context of the organization where you can actually say, hey, we want to actually talk about all the impact that we've had, and here's a team that we've helped, here's a team that we've helped, here's a team that we've helped, and this is us. And because this impacts so many teams and people, please come talk to us about feedback, right? Please give us some feedback about this, right? And we'd love to learn. Yeah. So there's always sort of cases like that. I think it's just a matter of trying to find within the context of the organization what those are, and just doing it. The thing I will say is that it has to come from you, right? Yeah, it has to come from that leader, from the team, or from the individual, even engineer in a sense, right? No one's going to do that for us. But I think joint presentations, I think, is a good first step, right? Because it's hard to argue against that, right? It's like, well, sure, why not, right? Like, let's do this together and show the overarching, and we can be creative with that, right? So, yeah.
Very good advice. Let's see what the other questions that the people have. Let's see. I already answered this books, and let's see, things to watch. I already done this. There's another question. Thank you for the advice for on approaching new connections. In your experience, what have you found helpful for growing and continuing these relationships past the initial meeting? So they're basically asking, say, after the first initial introduction meeting, say, what's the advice to have to grow, continue growing and continue these relationships?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there was a study done some time back that showed that the reason people become friends is because of repeated, consistent contact.
True,
Right?
totally.
Okay, right? Yeah. You don't become friends because you meet someone and you have a very deep connection in the first time, and then you go. I mean, that's possible. It's happened, sure, right? But that's not the way it's usually done, right? The way it's usually done naturally is small, repeated contact, right? Right. So, for example, I'm friends with the concierges in my building, right? Why? Because I see them every morning, right? Yeah, the same time, every morning. Good morning. There, good morning. Okay, right. So and so, right? And so over time, this leads to something, right? I'm friends with some of my neighbors. Why? Because I see them on a repeated basis, maybe asynchronously, but I see them in the elevator. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, right? Yeah, and then you start, right? So yeah. So relationships like this, folks, it's the same thing, right? It's repeated contact, right? It's consistency, right? And it's authenticity. And uh, authenticity here again means that, remember, your goal isn't to, I mean, look, sometimes you want something from someone and that's fine. And you should go do that, right? And she'll say, hey, my name is so-and-so. I would like to talk to you about so-and-so because I need something. And that's okay, right? But I'm talking about a more general theme here, right? I'm talking about a more general theme of making your network of peers, of engineers, of scientists, of whoever else. And the way you do that is by finding people that you like to be around and just being and having consistency with them. And so concretely, in an organization, this can be a consistent one-on-one, for example, right? Maybe every month, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, whatever you want, right? And being authentic here means that, you don't need to have an agenda. You just want to talk to this person. And look, if there's a person out there who you don't want to talk to, don't do it, right? We're not saying you have to be authentic, right? But you have to at least do that, right? I mean, I'm basically pushing back against a lot of engineers not doing any of this, right? Like, yeah, yeah, sitting in a cave, right? Yeah, like, and just being one with their code and papers, and they will talk to nobody ever at any consistency, right? Yeah. And that's harmful for them in the long term, right? It's very harmful for them. It doesn't hurt them in the short term. It's hard to see that, but in the long term, it hurts them, right? So, yeah. So, and all you need to do is have consistent sort of relationship building exercise, just as you would if, I mean, I just want to use one analogy is that if you're in a romantic relationship, right? Can you imagine if you never talk to your partner for 3 days at a time? Like 3 days go by, 4 days go by, no one says anything, 5 days, and you just don't say anything, right? That would be weird, right? Like, yeah, like you can't have a relationship that way, yeah. You would rather have consistent, even if it's small, interactions, right? And that's how you build it, right? And so the same thing here, right? It's consistent, small, repetitive interactions with people that you like, people you want to build relationships with, right? And that's it. That's all you need to do, right? It's actually really simple, right? Um, and don't get caught up on what to talk about. Just make a connection. Maybe you'll talk about sports. Maybe you'll talk about this book behind me. Maybe we'll talk about just learn about what they do. Be curious. Like I said, you go to the library, you find an interesting title, you open the book, and you flip through it, and then you put it back. That's all you need to kind of do in that sense, right?
Good advice.
Yeah.
There's one more question. So in the presentation, what's the best way to inspire audience curiously to encourage a deep dive without losing them in the weeds?
Can you say that again, Chester? You broke up a little bit.
Yeah, so in presentations, what's the best way to inspire audience curiously to engage a deep dive without losing them in the weeds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's actually a nice tweet I saw the other day that, and I forgot to actually put it on this presentation. Of it's basically storytelling, right? It just comes down to that. And one of the best pieces of advice I got once from a mentor, he said that in any speech you're supposed to do this. You're supposed to tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and then tell them that you told them. Right? I'll say it again. Tell the audience what you're going to tell them, and then tell them that you told them. Right? Right? Yeah. So you have this consistent sort of theme of like repetition, isn't it, right? But also you can look at story arcs. So you know, probably people here know about the Hero with a Thousand Faces, about the archetypes of struggles and heroic epics and things like that, right? So it's very similar here when we talk about stories and deep dives. You're starting with the world as it is today. Today, here is the world, right? But there was a problem in the kingdom, right? There was this evil thing, right? Okay. So we struggled and we wanted to do this, and then we won by doing this. And now the world is a better place. See, right? Right? Similar thing here, right? You start off with the world as it is today, but there's a problem. And here is basically what we did about the problem. You know, and the struggle was like this, we had to do this and do that, but in the end, here are the results and it looks so good, right? You know, so that whole arc should be drawn up, right? So that people always have the context, you know, like details should be there in deep dives, but they shouldn't just be, we should be very disciplined of how we talk about the details and when we talk about details within a deep dive, right? So like, I'll give you examples. So many times I've seen deep dives, deep technical, deep dives about something where they just start with like the equations of something. And there's this paper and I did this and I did this and you know, and we're sitting there scratching our heads going, what is this for? Right? What problem are you solving? Is it a problem? Why is it a problem? Right? Yeah, like just all the stuff, right? That's just in their heads, but they haven't communicated that. And this, by the way, is to a technical audience. I'm not even talking about executives. I'm talking about technical researchers, right? Who still don't understand the context of the problem this presenter is trying to solve, right? So, you know, those are some of the things that people should be, you know, don't negate the story, have the story there, add the detail at the right time. And that's how I would do it. The best presentations I've seen deep dives were more so about the connective tissue, the story, and then the details of how they did it versus just this, right? And I know it sounds maybe obvious, but you know, common sense.
When you just solve the technical problems, this is so hard, I need to tell them. And then you forget the story. Okay. I think that was the last question. Let me see, there's a bunch of a chat here. So we're on 102. So let's see, any other has other questions want to ask, and you can post it on the Q&A section. So I didn't quite follow with the chat. There's a lot of chat, a lot of chat here. So, Bill.
Oh, never mind. I was just reading the QA. Okay.
Yeah, that's the question you just answered. Yes. Yeah, so, okay. Yeah. So, Bill, would you mind open up for the mic for anybody? We'll give them maybe another 5-6 minutes for people to ask questions directly rather than typing, in case somebody.
You want to open up for everybody, or if they raise their hand to open up?
Yeah, whoever wants to raise the hand.
Yeah, because we still have like a lot of people. It's hard to open up for everyone. So I would suggest, you know, if anybody want to speak to ask questions, you can raise your hand. We can unmute you.
I don't know how this works. So how you raise a hand?
Yeah, actually you have okay, I have one person raise hand.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for this talk. It's a very important talk, and I enjoy a lot because it's a problem that I face in my company. It's a big company, but I think it's not important to tell the name of the company, of course. But okay, it's a automaker. Okay, so you can think in many brands of
Yes.
automakers. Okay. So so I'm a data scientist inside of this company, and I saw the problem inside of the our team is almost the communication. Okay. Much of the my colleagues don't have a good habit, or usually don't have a good communication with business side. Okay. And most of them discuss technical things, and the business don't care about technical things. They only want you talk to straight to your point, and make them then feel you are right. Okay. And the data scientists have only the feeling, and to talk about the technical and scientific results, and it's not important. But what is important in the company, I think, what is very point out with your talk is about the build the stronger relationships with your colleagues. Okay. Because you are working with colleagues that you spend most of your time in day. Okay. So maybe you spend more time with these colleagues with your family. Okay. So these colleagues are your family too. Okay. And if you be authentic person, it's better for you. Okay. Because people know you. Okay. And know how we can reach you. Okay. And understand you better. Okay. If you are a person that have a strong behavior. Okay. People already know this is your way to be. Okay. It's not a problem. Okay. It belongs to yourself. Okay. So it's important to show your authenticity. Okay. And as I said in the chat, it's important junior guys to make a part of a team. Okay. Make questions. Okay. Maybe most of the questions don't make sense. Okay. At the beginning, but I have experience in my team. Some juniors make questions, and we can start to think, okay, it makes sense. Why not to try it? Okay. And some examples we have are good results. Okay. So if you want to make difference, okay, don't have afraid to make questions. Okay. It's important. Okay. And you learn with that. Okay. My question is, I have a problem in this team, not with me, but with a colleague. Okay, this colleague is very shy. Okay, so how I can build a relationship with this colleague, or try to make him to see this is important for him to communicate more with the colleagues. Okay, because he's shy, so it's very difficult to know how he's thinking about one problem. Okay. And all colleagues communicate, but this specific colleague don't have have these issues. Okay.
Sorry, I had to interrupt you because
no, sorry.
I guess his question is how to work with a difficult colleague, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, so thanks, Nuno, for that. I mean, just going back to what you said about junior folks being able to contribute. I mean, absolutely. I think there's actually a saying. Let me see if I can remember it. If they have dark hair, like someone's young, basically. What is it? Trust the reasoning, not the conclusion. If they have gray hair, trust the reasoning and the conclusion. If they have white hair, trust the conclusion, not the reasoning. So there's something there, basically, right? That's, yeah. So I mean, there's a full spectrum of like contributions across experience levels, across ages, right? Across all that, right? So, and I think it's definitely important to have I mean, there's also that saying that science progresses one death at a time, right? Sometimes you just need someone to just leave the field, and then so the new ones can actually create something new and question all the assumptions, right? So I definitely agree with that. Young folks, you're right, can sometimes be shy and be timid in saying something up front. Yeah, so I mean, and this is why I'm hoping, like with talks like this, that we can say, hey, look, you have to market yourself, market your work, and market your thinking, right? So that that's actually valuable, right? Don't view it as failure. Just view it as you trying to contribute to some larger picture, right? So that's definitely very important. As far as you and your colleague, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. The silver lining is it's a very common problem. So you're not alone. I didn't quite get the details of what the exact scenario was there, but sounds like you're trying to build a relationship with this person, but that they're super shy or something like that. Um, I think I think you have to modulate how you approach different people. So, for example, me as a manager, um, I don't manage everyone the same way, right? Like, people have different personalities, right? And so you have to cater your own style to this personality, right? Yeah. So someone is very, very extroverted, you deal with them a certain way. Someone might be much more shy, much more introverted, deal with them a certain way, right? Yeah. So you should, your job as a leader is basically to find a way that you can make yourself resonate with this other person, right? Find a way in which you can get to them, in which you can actually like link up with them, right? And like, I'm sure you don't treat all your friends the same way, in the sense of you like them all, but you communicate with them in different style, right? Same thing here. I think the key is try to find, if indeed they want a relationship. If they don't, that's a different story. But if they do, the key is to find what resonates with them. And sometimes it could be something as dumb as they just like talking about these specific topics. So maybe that's use that as like an entryway. And sometimes they just want to sometimes they just want you to listen to them, right? Like, I've had people who just want to sit there and talk, and all I do is listen, and that's what they want, right? And sometimes vice versa, right? So you have to figure that out, in a sense, and find the language that resonates with them and go from there. So, again, I don't know the details of your situation, but that's my first order Taylor expansion of the answer.
All right, I
Thank
get
you
a last
for
question.
your answer.
I gave you the time, so I have one last question from the Q&A session. So basically, say, he basically say whether you have been able to apply the things you mentioned. Can you give an example to share? This is the question, Karen.
Yes. Yeah, this was all this was forged in the melting pot of Silicon Valley in Washington. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, for example, like, I was giving you folks the examples of like the interview questions of what you can do to, what I do to test critical thinking is I don't, like, in my interviews, I don't ask specific things like, explain bubble sort to me, or versus quick sort or something like that, right? I don't care about that. I ask critical questions about, here's a problem. For example, when I was in the autonomous space, a lot of the questions I asked was, here's a problem that we're having today. How would you solve it? And this is what I'm thinking. And, yeah, so you kind of like go off that, right? We're talking about managing teams. Yeah. So again, like I was saying here, that different personalities require different ways of managing, right? You can't do cookie cutter managing sort of for everyone the same way. It just won't work. I've had folks who, and they're all brilliant, by the way, have folks who super shy, right? Like really, really shy, but very brilliant. I've had folks who were not shy, but couldn't communicate, right? Like, yeah, it was literally hard for them to string together a coherent sentence about something, Right? So, even with their peers, they were very confused. Yeah. So that needs a different level of coaching, right? I've had folks who would get frustrated, like, man, I'm doing all this work, but no one gets it. People just don't get it, right? And so, yeah, the answer is, well, have you done the work to make it visible? Have you shared it with people? Have you done that? No. Well, okay. So why don't you do that? Well, because I'm a little shy. Well, let's talk about that, right? What does that mean to you to be shy, right? How does it make it, right? Yeah. So there's all these sort of things that come into effect. Again, I think I gave the example of my career about the relationship building. Back in 2010 or 11 or something like that, I had my own company where I worked with the NIH, National Institute of Health. And the way I got that contract at the time was literally just a cold email, right? Yeah, it was a cold email to a PI over at the NIH that I saw some of the work that they were doing. And I thought that I could contribute. So I just emailed him. I did not know him, right? I said, hey, my name is Taryn. Here's an example of the work I do. I noticed you guys doing this. I would love to help. Could we chat? When's a good time? Right? Bam, 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 bam. Right? Very, very succinct, very to the point, giving the story. Here's the world as it is today, but you have this problem. Here's how we can, I think it can be solved. Can we talk? We should talk, right? Just doing that. And he replied, right? So yeah, so, and that's a relationship. And I have a very good relationship with this person, this PI, to this day, right? Yeah, he helped me actually get to where I am today, right? But it began because I marketed myself, right? I marketed my work, right? Via cold email, right? And by the way, I send out a lot of cold emails all the time, right? Sometimes you don't get responses, and that's fine, right? So, but I built these relationships, right? So that's an example. That's some of the examples. I'm trying to give folks concrete examples of like how to do this, right? Don't negotiate with yourself, right? Just go do it, right? The worst thing anyone can say to you when you reach out to them is they just don't answer. Or sometimes they reach out to you and say no. In fact, I've reached out to so many people and I've never had anyone come back like angry or saying no. At most, they just don't reply, right? But that's the worst case, right? So yeah, so those are I want to say examples that I would encourage people to do. If you're talking about organizations, yeah, I mean, I used to be, I've worked in big companies, Motorola, and the big companies over here as well, Apple. And it's the same thing. You just reach out to people, get to know them. It's actually easier in big organizations because you already have something in common, right? You work for the same organization, right? So yeah, so it's already something that you can kind of, use in a sense, right? To talk to people. And again, I'm not saying do this in like a Machiavellian way. I'm saying build relationships and you don't know where they will lead you. Life is very nonlinear in that sense, right? My career growth, I attribute a lot to hard work, persistence, grit, and relationships, right? These are people who help you to, one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And I want everyone to go home tonight and do this piece of homework. Think about where you are today and trace back, okay, all the relationships that got you to where you are today. And you will be very surprised. You'll be very surprised to see the effect of that, right? Because it's going to be like, oh, I've had a friend who knew a friend who knew this and I did that, that's where you are today, right? So that's the homework I'd put to the panel.
Yeah, with that, and thank you, Taryn. I mean, this is a great talk. And as I said, it's like, this is a totally different talk than we ever hosted in the San Francisco Big Analytics for 5 years. So this is a, totally, great advice. And I have learned a lot. And I'm sure that I see you talk and I can see many of the things I can thinking apply in terms of my own career and my own management in my own teams. I can apply that. Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, much.
Thank you all for doing this, and it's an honor to present, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. The recording will be available later, when we upload to YouTube channel, so you can, I'll post on the meetup page and pay attention to that. Okay, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.